What's good, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. And before I get started, man, I just want to tell you guys to, click that subscribe button and subscribe to my channel. Like, comment, dislike if you don't like what I have to say, you know, and keep subscribing to my channel, And so with that out of the way, you know, as you guys know, or if you haven't, you know, Kirk Cousins. That's who the Atlanta Falcons signed, to be their quarterback. Kirk Cousins. 4 years, 180 million, 100 million of it guaranteed. And, look, I'll be honest with you guys. Like when I saw the numbers, and the years, at first glance, I'm not going to lie to you guys. I freaked out. I freaked out at the numbers. But, as the, money figures and the, yearly amount of how much Kirk Cousins was owed, I mean, well, not owed, well, how much Atlanta was paying him, moving forward, as soon as all of that started to trickle in, and you realize, like, the first year of his contract is 45 million and that's guaranteed, and then the second year of it is 45 million and that's guaranteed, and then the third year of it is basically 10 million, and the fourth year, which is, actually none of that was guaranteed. So basically, essentially, even though you might look at first glance, you might look at it and say it's a 4-year deal, technically looking at it, it's a 2-year deal. It's 45 million guaranteed in year one, and 45 million of it is guaranteed in year two. So essentially, it's about 90 million for the first 2 years. So looking at it, I think the contract that he got is actually, I mean, yearly you can say he's a little overpaid, but for the Falcons specifically, considering it's that much money, but it's 2 years, kind of, sort of. I think it's acceptable. I think for what he got is actually kind of acceptable, you know. And so looking at that, you know, I think the contract is okay. Now, as far as Kirk Cousins, as to what I think about it, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with Kirk Cousins being an Atlanta Falcon quarterback. I am. And look, here's my thing. Ideally, when I look at this signing for the Falcons, or the quarterback situation for the Falcons, ideally, if it were me, my first choice would have been to call up Washington or New England, because you're not getting uh uh what's the quarterback I'm trying, Caleb Williams. Like, you're not getting Caleb Williams. He's going number 1 in Chicago, so you're not getting him. So ideally, I would have called, and maybe the Falcons did. I probably would bet that they probably did. Like, I would have called Washington or New England and said, you know what? How much would it have cost to move up to 2 or 3 and try to snag up Jaden Daniels from LSU, who most people consider to be the second best QB in the class? And so, how much would it have cost to get a guy like him? And look, there's probably a real chance that the Washington Commanders or the Patriots are just like, no, we're not moving down. We're gonna stick at 2 and 3, and we're gonna take our guy. We're gonna take our quarterback. And if that's the case, then you look at the next best available option for the Falcons, and the best option for them is Kirk Cousins. Like, you look at the quarterbacks that were available, it was Kirk Cousins, it was Baker Mayfield, who signed back with Tampa, and you're probably looking at Justin Fields. And judging by the market for Justin Fields, apparently nobody wants Justin Fields. And the league is just telling you that Justin Fields is a backup quarterback. That's what he is. like people like I was looking at something earlier that league officials are like, you know, we view Justin Fields the same way we view Sam Darnold. And Sam Darnold basically just he signed a 1-year deal with the Vikings. And so if you look at all of that, Kirk Cousins was the best available option. And if you look at Kirk Cousins' past, you know, he has familiarity with Washington. You know, he has familiarity with man, I'm losing my train of thought here. I'm sorry, guys. But he has familiarity with dang, I'm struggling right now. Raheem Morris. Yeah, that's right. Him. Yeah. So he has familiarity with Raheem Morris from his days with the Washington. You know, and he was the quarterback there, and you know, Raheem Morris was with Kyle Shanahan, and he was with Sean McVay, and you know, they run the same system. And so you look at that familiarity and that connection, like it makes sense. Raheem Morris is bringing that system with him and Zach Robinson, who was the quarterbacks coach with the Rams, who ran the same system with Sean McVay. And like all of these guys are trying to bring that system, that Kyle Shanahan, like Zach, Sean McVay, like system to the Falcons. And so you look at all of that, it makes sense for them to get Kirk Cousins because of the familiarity. And look, I'll be honest, I haven't always been the biggest Kirk Cousins fan. Like I know what he doesn't do. I'm aware of what he hasn't done in big games, you know, on prime time. I know what his playoff record is 1-4. Even though I will say this, his one win was against the New Orleans Saints. So I mean, hey, if your one win is actually against the team that I hate the most in all of professional football, the New Orleans Saints, if that's your one playoff win, then you're actually kind of good with me. But you know, but look, his playoff resume is not that good. We all know what he's done in national televised games or big games or games against winning teams or whatever the case may be. Like I get it, but I will say this with Kirk Cousins. Like I've looked at you look at his play over the last, like personally for me as a guy who watches football, like I'll be honest, like I've grown to appreciate Kirk Cousins a little bit over the last like 2 to 3 years. You know, like I have, like I do think, you know, he's become, you know, just a tad underrated a little bit. Like, you know, I think he's one of those guys where people, you know, was overhyping earlier in his career, and you know, he fails in those big moments or whatever, and then people just slandered him. And I feel like Kirk Cousins is one of those dudes who people just slander him so hard and just nitpick and criticize what he doesn't do to the point where, you know, look, man, 7 out of his last 9 seasons, like he's thrown for over 4,000 yards. Like that's a good thing. You know, like that's a good thing. You know, you look at this past season, you know, with the Vikings before he got injured. Like I thought Kirk Cousins at that point was playing the best ball of his career. You know, and you look at the season before that, I think the Vikings were 13-4. He led them to that record. Now they lost their first playoff game, which kind of speaks to what Kirk Cousins doesn't do in the postseason or in big moments. And so, but look, man, when it comes to Atlanta, when it comes to the Falcons, like this is a team that they haven't been to the playoffs in 6 years, going on probably 7. And so we're talking about 6 to 7 years of just not being a playoff team. And you look at the quarterback play from the Falcons, really for the past 4.5 years now, like it's been bad QB play from the latter years of Matt Ryan. You know, the last 2 years of Matt Ryan to, you know, Marcus Mariota to Desmond Ritter. Like this is what us Falcon fans have just been grown accustomed to. And so you bring in Kirk Cousins, and it's clear that he's an upgrade. And you look at Raheem Morris, he's coming in and he's looking and he realizes, like, look, man, I was with Tampa Bay 14 was it 14 15 years ago, and I struggled in Tampa in part because I didn't have a quarterback. I had Josh Freeman, who he had a pretty decent rookie first year, and then he struggled the remaining 2 years, and ultimately it ended up costing me my job, and he got fired. Raheem Morris, when he was head coaching in Tampa. And so he comes here and he realizes, look, man, I don't want an unknown. Like, and so he looks at the situation and he just realizes, look, man, I want some stability. And yeah, Kirk Cousins is coming off an Achilles, and there's risk in that. And yeah, it's definitely a risk to some extent, but at the same time, Kirk Cousins, like, he's a pocket passer. So he's not someone that is running around using his legs. He's a pocket passer. So you can make a real argument that, you know what, the Achilles that he's trying to recover from probably isn't going to affect him as much or too much, considering he's a pocket passer. And so, and he's walking into an offensive line with the Falcons who, I mean, it got better. Like, if there's one thing you can say about the Falcons, like, the offensive line actually got better over the course of the season. I think they're rated like top 5 from, if you look at Pro Football Focus. And so he's walking into a situation where he has a good offensive line. We got, Kyle Pitts and Drake London. I think Drake London is really good, but they're young, and like you got 2 young, talented weapons. You got Bijan Robinson. They also signed the guy, I think his name is Mooney. He signed him from Chicago. I think, and you add all that up, and look, I think there's a real possibility that Atlanta will still draft another wide receiver, in the first, 2 to 3 rounds of this draft. You got the kid Neighbors from LSU. You got the kid from Washington. I can't pronounce his name. I think his name is Ubazi. I'm not gonna try to act like I know his name, but he's a very talented dude. And so they could get one of those dudes, or they could get somebody in the 2nd or 3rd round. So look, man, Kirk Cousins, he's walking into a situation where he's gonna have some weapons. When you add in, whoever we draft, if we draft a receiver in the draft, which I think we will, and you add in Kyle Pitts and Drake London, and you have Bijan Robinson, who I think is just on the verge of superstardom as a running back. So you got weapons galore. I think it's a pretty nice situation for Kirk Cousins. And, look, I'll also add this with the Falcons signing Kirk Cousins, because it's basically it's a 2-year deal. Don't let the contract, numbers fool you. It's basically a 2-year deal. It doesn't stop the Falcons for trying to find their heir apparent to Kirk Cousins moving forward. Maybe they draft one in this year's draft, but you know what? They could draft one, and they could find that guy in 2025 next year, or in 2026. And so they still have the opportunity to find that guy while also not being stuck with Kirk Cousins, in the event that, he falters. You know what I mean? And so I think overall, like, I like it. I like the Kirk Cousins signing. I know there's been some Falcon fans that don't like it, and I get it. Look, I get it. Kirk Cousins isn't everyone's cup of tea. We all know what he hasn't done in the biggest moments, and we all know what he hasn't done in the playoffs. I get it. I understand it. But for me, for the Falcons, you got to get to the playoffs first. You know what I mean? Like, get to the playoffs before you worry about what you worry about what you do in the playoffs. So I think that's where the Falcons are right now. Like, you know, get to the playoffs. You got a quarterback that can be an adult, that can manage games. He can throw the football accurately. He can execute. He can make all the throws. And so you finally have a guy like that. And, that's what Kirk Cousins is here for. You know, get this team to the point where this team can win games and be competitive. And I think Kirk Cousins can do that. And so we'll see what they do. We'll see what Atlanta does moving forward. But overall, I like the Kirk Cousins move. I like it. I think the contract is manageable. You got him for basically 2 years. Moving forward, we'll see what they do in the draft. I think they could use it. I think they definitely need another pass rusher. So you got to look at that. I think they could still use another wide receiver. They could probably use another corner. They could maybe even they can use another offensive tackle, considering Jake Matthews is I want to say he's like 33, so he's getting a little old in the tooth. So I mean, they can use 3 or 4 needs along with what they just got with Kirk Cousins, and so I like it. I like where the Falcons. I like it. I think it's a step in the right direction.